Get started, so if you could find your way to a seat and get comfortable. This is the Anamorphic and Broadcast Encryption session. And our first speaker will be Mark Chandri, who's presenting optimal trader tracing from pairings.
Thank you for the introduction. All right, so what is trader tracing? So we imagine that we have a content distributor broadcasting a message to a bunch of recipients. We want the communication to be secure, so the broadcast is encrypted and everybody has a key that allows them to decrypt. And what we're concerned about is if some user leaks their key. Say they post it online or something like that, and that would completely break the security of the system. So this led to the concept of trader tracing, whose goal is to, at a minimum, you want to identify the trader who leaked the key. So then you can prosecute them, revoke their key or something like that, but we're just going to focus on just identifying the trader. So since its introduction about 30 years ago, trader tracing has become a major goal in cryptography. And in particular, what we want is trader tracing with small ciphertext and decryption keys. And we also want success even if a bunch of traders collude, and also even if they somehow obfuscate their keys in an attempt to avoid tracing. So all we're given is that they pool their keys together, they create a decoder box, and we want to take that decoder box and find out who actually leaked their key. So what is known? So it's rather easy to get a scheme where the parameters grow with n, the number of users. The first non-trivial scheme used pairings over elliptic curves to get ciphertext and secret keys, and also public keys that grew as n to the 1/2. And then more recently, there's been work on using other tools in cryptography, such as obfuscation or lattices, that get all the way down to parameter sizes that are independent of the number of users. But what's interesting is a lot of this recent progress has not actually used pairings, even though they were the first tool to get any non-trivial scheme. And so what we do in this work is we actually go all the way with pairings as well, and we showed how to use pairings over elliptic curves to get an optimal scheme where parameter sizes are independent of n. All right, so I'll briefly give an idea of our techniques. And we're going to follow a tried and true approach to get trader tracing, which is something called private linear broadcast. So here we have publicly generated, I'll call them normal ciphertext. And every user is given an individual secret key with the property that all of the user secret keys can decrypt these publicly generated normal ciphertexts. We also have tracing ciphertext, and these are, for us, they'll be privately generated. And these tracing ciphertexts come with an index. And the property is that if the index is if your index as a decryptor is at least as great as the index of the tracing ciphertext, you will be able to decrypt. But if your index is less than the index of the tracing ciphertext, you cannot decrypt. So there's going to be a few security properties we'll need of a private linear broadcast scheme. The first is message hiding, which just formalizes that you can't decrypt if your index isn't high enough. And the additional requirements have to do with the index in these tracing ciphertexts. So the first one is index hiding, which says that unless you possess the secret key for user J, you cannot distinguish between ciphertext encrypted to user J or to index J-1. Clearly, if you're J, you can tell these ciphertexts apart because you'll be able to decrypt one and not the other. But aside from that, you shouldn't be able to learn anything about the index. And then we also have normal hiding security, which says that these publicly generated normal ciphertexts are indistinguishable from tracing ciphertext to index n. And remember, tracing ciphertext to index n can be decrypted by anyone, and also public non-tracing ciphertext can be decrypted by anyone. So it sort of makes sense that these two should be indistinguishable, and that's what we will insist on. OK, so the rough idea on how to trace in a private linear broadcast scheme is that if you have this decoder, you will estimate the probability that it decrypts the various ciphertexts. So I'll call Pj the probability that the decoder decrypts ciphertext, tracing ciphertext for index j, and Pbot is the probability that the decoder decrypts the normal ciphertext. So what you're going to do is you're just going to plot these. And you're going to look for gaps. And the reason that this works is that we know for if your index is 0, that means you can't no one can decrypt. So this box has to have, basically can't learn anything. And it turns out that the probability is a half rather than 0, and this is for subtle reasons I won't get into. Right, so message hiding security says that P0 is about a half. On the other hand, if this is a useful decoder, if it actually decrypts normal ciphertext, it says that P-bot has to be somewhat larger than a half. Normal hiding security says that Pn has to be approximately P-bot. And index hiding security says anywhere where there's an honest user, that the probability has to be roughly constant. So we have, on one hand, that the probability is big for P-bot, it's small for P0, and the only places that it can differ are on the adversary's keys, and so therefore, by identifying a gap, you'll identify an adversary. Okay, so what do we know? We know that if you have a private linear broadcast scheme with these security properties, you can actually get traitor tracing as I described. It turns out that the type of security you need is one where the adversary sees 2 ciphertext. I won't get into the details of why. 1 ciphertext is not enough, but you need security if the adversary sees 2 ciphertext. And then additionally, we have a method where you can basically take a version of private linear broadcast where there's no message and generically enable you to add messages using attribute-based encryption. Okay, so this is what was already known. And so by instantiating this framework with the needed messageless private linear broadcasts and ABE, you can get traitor tracing. And we know how to do both of these from lattices, and this gives the optimal traitor tracing scheme from lattices. Okay. I'm going to slightly generalize the statement of the prior work, and basically you can this procedure works not just with 2 ciphertext security, but kind of any number of ciphertexts. Okay, and then another way we're going to generalize this is that the attribute-based encryption scheme doesn't necessarily need to be a full-fledged attribute-based encryption for circuits. It just needs to be an attribute-based encryption that can handle the decryption circuit of the messageless private linear broadcast. And for example, our goal is to get something from pairings, which means, okay, we can do long-depth computation for ABE from pairings. So if we can get a messageless private linear broadcast scheme where the decryption is log depth, we will be able to instantiate this framework from pairings. Okay, and that's more or less what we do, but there are some annoying difficulties. So the first theorem in this work is that we show how to actually relax the step where we go from PLBE to traitor tracing very slightly. For the security properties, we're still going to ask that message hiding and index hiding are 2 ciphertext secure, but we're going to relax normal hiding to be only 1 ciphertext secure. So remember, normal hiding says that the normal ciphertexts are indistinguishable from the tracing ciphertext. All right, and then the second step is to actually realize this slightly weaker version of messageless PLBE just from standard assumptions, weak PRFs. And as a corollary, if you have log-depth weak PRFs and ABE for, say, log-depth computation, then you can get traitor tracing, and we can instantiate both of these from pairings over elliptic curves. Okay. So I don't have nearly enough time to go into the details of both of these steps, so I'm just going to focus on the first one, getting traitor tracing from 1 ciphertext normal hiding security. So the starting point is what we're going to try to do is let's suppose we have a scheme. I haven't told you how to do it, but let's just suppose we have a scheme that has 1 ciphertext security for normal hiding. And let's just try to get 2 ciphertext security for normal hiding. How might we do this? Well, a natural thing to do is to just have several independent instances running in parallel. So the master secret key is just going to be a bunch of independent secret keys for this underlying 1 ciphertext secure scheme. The user secret keys are also going to be 1 user secret key for each instance of this scheme. And then finally, for the ciphertext, when you're going to encrypt, what you're going to do is you're going to choose a random instance of the underlying one ciphertext secure scheme and just encrypt to that instance. And because the recipient has the keys for every single instance, they will automatically be able to decrypt. And the hope is that by doing this, we somehow get to ciphertext security. And indeed, if you imagine that you encrypt two ciphertexts, well, probably you're going to choose different instances for those two ciphertexts, which means that each instance only ever sees one ciphertext. Because each instance is one ciphertext secure, we're happy. We can rely on the one ciphertext security of the underlying encryption scheme as long as the instances are different. But the problem is we're always going to be limited to a polynomial number of instances. And there's going to be an inverse polynomial chance, therefore, that the instances you encrypt to are actually the same for your two ciphertexts. And what this means is we don't have any hope of actually achieving two ciphertext security using this approach. However, what we can show is something a bit weaker. We can show that basically, even though you can't get this two ciphertext security, we can say something directly about the decoders that we're trying to trace. And specifically, what we can show is that if the p-bot, the success probability on normal ciphertext, is really high, let's say not just a bit above a half, but like basically one, a little less than one, then there is some probability that your pn, the success probability on tracing ciphertext that can be decrypted by anyone, is at least a little bit above a half. So very good decoders can't have tiny p sub n too often. Maybe they'll have tiny p sub n sometimes, but at least occasionally you're going to get a non-trivial p sub n that's a bit larger than a half. All right, and this is enough to trace. Because if we have this decoder with this very high success probability on p-bot, we know that with decent probability, our pn is going to be separated from a half. And then we can just proceed with the old tracing algorithm. The old tracing algorithm works kind of no matter how close this pn is to p0. It's still the case that you will find a gap and output that gap, and that gap will be a malicious user. All right. But there are some problems with this approach. So one is we had to make this assumption that the decoder that we were given actually has a very high success probability, like 39 over 40 or something like that. And we also our tracing guarantee only works when the success probability for Pn is separated from half. But we only showed that it's separated from half sometimes. And it might not be all the time. So we're only guaranteed to even trace these really good decoders with constant but small probability. The good news is that both of these concepts have been studied before in the literature and have names. So this restriction that we can only trace decoders with high constant decryption probability is called threshold tracing. And this restriction for where you only have a low constant probability of actually tracing such a decoder is called risky traitor tracing. And the good news is that actually in some prior work we showed that you can generically eliminate both of these restrictions just with some constant or some blowup that depends on the security parameter, but it's completely independent of the number of users. And that's actually all I have. So thank you very much.
If you have questions, please come up to the mic. Not, let's thank Mark again.
All right, thank you.
And our next talk will be Yaoqing Xie is going to present a generic approach to adaptively secure broadcast encryption in the plane model. This is joint work with Brent Waters and David Wu.
No? Oh, good. Now it's working. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to repeat what just happened in the introduction. So this work is about a generic approach to adaptively secure broadcast encryption in the plane model. And yeah, this is joint work with the great collaborator, Ben Waters and David Wu. Okay. So broadcast encryption. A broadcast encryption is a system with n users such that we can encrypt to any subset of the users efficiently. So in this system, we will have a central server. The central server would assign secret keys independently to every of the users, along with a master public key that allows encryption. Anyone with the master public key can take as input a message, target set, a subset of the users, and then generate a ciphertext, which can be decrypted only by the users that are in the set. For the system to be non-trivial, we will require the ciphertext to be short. It should be not too much longer than the description of the set itself. So some form of syntax, the central party will run the setup algorithm, takes in the number of parties, and then output the master key pair. It will run the keygen algorithm to generate secret key for every of the party. The encryption algorithm takes in the master public key, the set, and the message, generate a ciphertext, which can be decrypted with the appropriate secret key. Okay? And in the context of broadcast encryption, it's often very convenient to separate the description of the set outside of the secret key, outside of the ciphertext. So we'll think of the decryption algorithm taking the set description along with the ciphertext. This gives us a convenient way to talk about the succinctness property. So we just say that, OK, now ignoring the set description itself, we want the ciphertext to be short, to be sublinear in the size of the set. For this talk, we're only going to discuss the ciphertext with constant size. By constant, I mean it is only dependent on the security parameter and not on the size of the set. OK, for broadcast encryption, we want succinctness. We also want correctness, basically saying that honest ciphertext should be honestly decryptable by the secret keys that are in the set. We also want security, which says another way, if I did not give out a secret key that is decrypting, then the ciphertext should hide the message. So let us expand a little bit about what security means. There are two major notions of security which are often discussed in the broadcast encryption domain. One is adaptive security, one is selective security. So in the adaptive security game, the adversary will first get the master public key. It can corrupt however many parties want, getting the secret key of these parties. And finally, it should submit a challenge set that contains parties that he hadn't corrupt. And then it will receive a ciphertext. And adaptive security guarantees that the ciphertext hide the underlying message, because the ciphertext is encrypted into a set that the adversary don't know the decrypting secret key. On the other hand, in the selective game, the adversary is required to submit the challenge set prior to seeing the master public key. And after that, it can make secret key queries for index that are outside the set and then receive the challenge ciphertext. So while these two definitions look sort of similar, it turns out adaptive security is way harder to achieve. If we restrict to the case where we only consider constructions with, achieving constant size secret key and ciphertext, then we, in general, only have two ways toward constructing adaptive secure broadcast. One is to rely on strong or complex assumptions and primitives, usually I/O-related primitives. And from this approach, we are able to get very succinct construction, at least asymptotically. We get constant size master public key. However, the underlying primitive or assumptions are usually hard to achieve. We also have the other approach, the dual system encryption approach, which allows us to get adaptive broadcast from just standard pairing assumption. However, this approach will give us a quadratic size master public key. And also, we don't know how to adapt this trick to using lattice assumption, at least in the broadcast domain. On the other hand, we know much more if we only want to achieve selective security. We know how to achieve linear size or even constant size master public key, assuming assumptions that are arguably weaker than I/O. We also have quite a few candidate lattice constructions. And we even know constructions from pairings that only rely on search assumption instead of decisional assumption. So why do we care about adaptive security? Well, first of all, adaptive security is the correct notion. It's not really correct to assume that the adversary will submit its attack strategy before seeing the master public key. Right? And also, in broadcast domain, we don't really have any generic transformation from selective security to adaptive security. In particular, the common complexity leveraging technique does not work for broadcast because complexity leveraging will give an O and blow up on every instance, on every parameter in the construction, and that violates the succinctness requirement for broadcast encryption. So we want adaptive security, but we also want all the benefits that we know in the selective route. So there's an alternative route introduced by Gentry and Waters, which shows that we can get adaptive security with the benefits using the help of the random oracle. And the statement looks like this. Give me a semi-static secure broadcast. And with the random oracle, I can update it into an adaptive secure broadcast. So I introduce a new word, semi-static. What does it mean? Semi-static security is something that falls between the adaptive security game and the selective security game. So in a semi-static game, the adversary needs to submit an honest set S star. Okay? What does this S star mean? This S star means that the adversary is not allowed to corrupt any user within the honest set. And finally, after the key query stage, the adversary can choose a challenge set S that falls completely inside the honest set S star. So it's very, very close to a selective game in the sense that all the corruptible keys are already decided before the master public key. However, the adversary still have a little bit of adaptiveness in the sense that it can choose the challenge set S slightly adaptively within the honest set. And in terms of construction, it turns out semi-static secure broadcast is indeed something that is slightly easier to achieve compared to adaptive broadcast. In particular, for all these benefits we want, we have some semi-static secure construction from assumption that is weaker than I/O with linear size master public key. And we also have one candidate lattice construction for semi-static security. And we also have construction that only require on search pair assumption. So combined with the Gentry-Water transformation, we now know that we have adaptive secure broadcast with all these properties we want in the random oracle model. Well, as a theoretical cryptographer, we don't really like random oracle. So the next question is, do we really need this random oracle? Can we remove this random oracle? And the answer is yes. For this work, we show that we can replace the random oracle in the Gentry-Water transformation with a publicly sampleable projective PRG. This primitive can in turn be constructed from various standard algebraic assumptions, including RSA, CDH, and LWE. And this gives us a lot of new broadcasts in the plain model without the random oracle. This gives us adaptive broadcast with linear size master public key without I/O. This gives us adaptive broadcast from lattice and also adaptive broadcast from search pair assumption. And we also note that this transformation also works for the distributed broadcast encryption. For this talk, I'm only going to talk about the centralized version, and I will refer you to the paper for the result on distributed broadcast. OK, so let's now go to the Gentry-Water transformation. The Gentry-Water transformation uses the two-key technique, which basically represents every adaptive identity using two semi-static identities. So here for the key of identity I have two slots for semi-static identity I0 and I1. And the key generation algorithm samples a random bit and then uses the identity IUI as the key of the adaptive identity, the adaptive key. And we note that the bit UI is part of the secret key. So it's part of the secret information that is only known to user I. So in order to encrypt this key, the encryptor doesn't know which identity is really using, which identity we're not using. So it's going to encrypt to both of the identities for every index I in the set. So the way this encryption works is that I'm going to separate my two S identities into two sets. I sample a random bit vi independently for every index in the set that I'm encrypting to, and then I'm setting S0 being the index I as i's, and S1 being the index I 1 minus vi. Okay, and then I'm encrypting my message M doubly into 2 sets. Now, the decryption correctness is immediate from this construction. Basically, the real identity, the real semi-static key that I have for identity I, will always fall in one of the set. So therefore, by the correctness of the semi-static broadcast, I can always decrypt the corresponding ciphertext, getting the message. So, so far so good. This is a summary version. And the question is, why is it adaptive secure? So to prove adaptive security, we will have a reduction that is interacting with the adaptive adversary and then the semi-static challenger. So our reduction will need to interact with the semi-static challenger. It initiates 2 N users, and then you need to submit the honest set. The way it submits the honest set is that it samples the identity bit that it's going to use for the key generations, and then for the dummy identities, for the identities that I'm not ever giving out the keys, I'm going to declare them as the honest set, like this. Okay? Then after that, whenever I have adaptive key queries, I'm just going to query my semi-static challenger on the real identities, which does not fall into the honest set that I declare. And this is sufficient for me to generate the adaptive keys. Finally, the magic comes here, and then I'm getting a adaptive challenge query for some set S. Instead of sampling V at random, I'm going to program Vi equals UI, where UI is the bits that I sampled initially. Okay, something like this. This will decide my set S0 and S1. Note that this programming does not actually leaks any dependence between U and V, because I'm only allowed to choose my set S as a set that only contains index that I didn't query, only contains the index that I don't know about UI. Therefore, as a consequence, I get my ciphertext CT1 encrypting the set S1, which contains all honest identity. And we know that from the semi-static security guarantee, this ciphertext CT1 to S1 is going to hide M perfectly. Oh, not perfectly, computationally. Okay? And with another hybrid, switching the role of S0 and S1, we prove the adaptive security for this construction. Okay? So far so good. This is secure. There is one slight issue with this construction. Basically, the bit Vi needs to be part of the ciphertext. And then the length of it, if I need a random bit for every index in S, it all grows with the size of S, which is not succinct. So therefore, we need some way to compress it. So first, a quick summary on what the reduction is doing. The reduction needs to sample UI at first, so to declare the honest set. After that, it will receive a challenge set S. You want to program Vi equals UI. And finally, I don't want to reveal Vi directly. I want to reveal Vi succinctly. I want to publish some row S, such that this row S allows me to compute the random bit Vi for I in a set, and then this size of row S is succinct. And the first approach that we introduce is secure. Everything is good until the succinctness issue. So the way Gentry-Walter transformation works in the random oracle model is basically, instead of sampling Vi randomly, I'm going to sample Vi from a random oracle with a short seed. So the seed is short, everything is succinct. And then to program Vi equals UI, I just program the random oracle. And one thing is that I'm only programming the random oracle on the index in the set. Therefore, the seed is really only leaking information that is in the set. So can we replace this random oracle? Can we not use the random oracle and use some PRG, PRF instead? Well, if we want to sample Vi from some short seed in the plain model, and then we want to program UI equals Vi, then it's better the case that UI is also sampled from some sparse space. And therefore, a naive approach is to sample UI from a PRG, and then when I set Vi equals UI, I reveal my row, my short information of V, as the PRG seed. This allows compute all the Vi bits in a succinct way. So everything succinct is good, programming is good. But the issue is that this PRG seed is leaking too much. If I'm giving out the PRG seed that I use to compute U, I actually learn every bit of U. And therefore, I can observe that I'm using a K that is consistent to U because I'm allowed to get bits UI that are outside the set. So this key K is leaking too much. We want some K that leaks only on the VIs that I want to reveal. So I want a weaker key KS that leaks only the index on S. Therefore, when I reveal this bit VI, I only see the bits that I'm supposed to see. How can I do this? Well, there are existing primitive that gives us this. So the work by Applebaum et al. Gives us a PRG with an extra projective property. It allows us to projective seed K into some subset S, such that this KS is short. It reveals only the bits that are inside the set S, and every bit outside the set S is still pseudorandom. So by plugging in this projective PRG, instead of reviewing the full key, I reveal the projective key, then everything is good. So this almost concludes our transformation in the plane model with two technical issues. First of all, this row S needs to be part of the ciphertext, which has to be generated from some public procedure. This project is currently a private algorithm, but we can introduce a new notion named public sampleability, saying that the projective seed can be simulatable. Okay, if we can do this, then we can have a public encryption procedure. And a smaller technical issue is that we need a adaptively secure projective PRG, but this turns out to only need some more fine-grained proof. Okay, and we show that from existing projective PRG construction with some small tweak on the algebra, we are able to get publicly sampleable projective PRG with essentially the same efficiency. And as a new result of our work, we also show a way to compress the CRS size of the group construction using pairing. So combining the publicly sampleable projective PRG we constructed, along with the semi-static broadcast encryption that are from previous work or from our work, we get all these new adaptive broadcast encryption with different properties that we want. So I want to end my talk with a few open problems. First of all, we want better adaptive group-based broadcast. In this work, we know how to get linear size master public key from decisional assumption. We get almost linear size master public key from search assumption. And can we close the gap? We don't know. That is a cool problem. And a second open problem is for better lattice-based broadcast. So currently, the only semi-static secure lattice construction that we know in the plane model rely on witness encryption, where the only lattice construction that we have, the security is based on the silicon evasive LW, which at current stage is, we see quite a few attacks in the past few months. So the construction itself, it's still not broken, but we still want something that is from some assumptions that are weaker compared to evasive LW. So in a recent collaboration with Jeffrey and David, we constructed a semi-static secure broadcast encryption from L succeeding LW, which is a weaker assumption, but the construction also needs the random oracle. So on this front, any construction that requires that uses a slightly weaker assumption from lattice will be very, very interesting. And finally, we know that from I/O we can get adaptive broadcast with constant size master public key. Is there any way we can get this without I/O? Maybe using project PRG from RSA? Yeah, this would be a very cute problem. Yeah. So that's all for my talk. Our paper is online on ePrint, and yeah, thank you all for listening. I'm happy to take any questions. Any questions? Nope.
Maybe just one question. Do you
Sure.
think there's any barrier to bringing down the master public key size? Do you think it's doable?
No, I'm not aware of any real barriers there. Yeah, so I think it is possible. I don't know how to do it, but I think it's possible. Yeah. Yeah.
If there are no more questions, let's thank our speaker again. And so next, the next paper we have in this session will be anamorphism beyond one-to-one messaging, public key with anamorphic broadcast mode. And this is a paper by, I apologize if I'm mutilating your name, Juan Than Do, Giuseppe Persiano, Wei Fan, and Moti Yang, and Wei Fan will be giving the talk.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. So I'm talking about anamorphic cryptography, and we extend from one-to-one communication to one-to-many communication. And this is a joy to work with Dosen Thanh from Vietnam. Thanh is actually the first researcher working in Vietnam and has a paper at Eurocrypt, and with Pino, Persiano, and Motiyong. So the term anamorphic is inspired from the anamorphic art, where an object can be seen from different viewpoints, but there is only one specific viewpoint that we can see the full image of the picture. And here is the picture that I took at the National Gallery in Singapore. And I try to convince you that only from my viewpoint that we can see the full chair. And in fact, on the second picture, you can see someone behind the chair, but hides a part of the chair. So it means that one part of the chair is actually painted in the opposite side of the room. And so only from my viewpoint, that this part, these two parts match. And from any other viewpoint, so you can see them separately. And so the two-view principle is also used very much in cryptography, of course, and in particular for security. When you have a ring view where there is the interaction between the insider party and this simulated view, that's a communication simulated by an outsider simulator. And we achieve the security when we can show that the ring view and the simulated view are indistinguishable. And so the anamorphic cryptography intuitively combines the two-view principle from anamorphic art and from cryptography to achieve both the functionality and the security. And in terms of functionality, so from one anamorphic ciphertext, then you can have two different views. And one with the secret key, normal secret key, then you can get a regular message. And another view is from the double key, then you can get a hidden anamorphic message. And in terms of security, everything should look normal to a very powerful adversary that we call a dictator. And it could be characterized by the following rule. The ciphertext rule says that the anamorphic ciphertext and the normal ciphertext are indistinguishable for an allow encryption with some specific public key. And the key rule requires that the dictator, when he can observe, can see the public key, for example, in PKI, then the dictator can come and ask the corresponding secret key. And this is somehow different from steganography, where steganography works for any channel, even for channel chosen by adversary, but the adversary observes the communication. And so if the adversary can go inside and corrupt the secret key of the party, then we don't know how to construct public key as steganography. And so up to now, everything looks normal to the adversary, and the user can deny the existence of the double key. But the dictator can suspect some user, and so in these papers, we put a new blocking rule where when the dictator suspects someone, then the dictator can block them from receiving the communication. And to deal with that, we try to extend to one-to-many channel, and in such a way that if one of the channels is not blocked, then the anamorphic message can be transmitted. And so, in fact, anamorphic cryptography is motivated by the ongoing crypto war between the government and big tech who try to control on the user in such a case, we call them dictator. And on the other side, the users seek to preserve the privacy. And so we can imagine that the dictator passed law to use a weak encryption, install the backdoor in the device. But you can see in the past that this way, the enemy, even the enemy of the dictator, can also exploit the weakness to get the information. So this, we can see, for example, the history of Clipper chip with the technical demonstration of Matt Blaze. And so this way, they put a huge risk for everyone, and including the dictator. And now we suppose that the dictator is clever enough to allow the use of standard encryption when studied by the community. And so to prevent the leakage of secret information from the outsider enemy. However, the dictator, of course, always try to control all the users. And so the dictator can require the receiver to surrender their secret key and can block any suspected user. And so exactly the model we propose is to provide a way to preserve the user privacy in this scenario. So let's talk about our model, public key encryption with anamorphic broadcast mode. So in public key encryption, in normal mode, then the receiver generates public key, secret key, and then the sender will use the secret public key to encrypt, and then the receiver uses the secret key to decrypt. And now, in the anamorphic broadcast mode, then the sender takes the public key and will generate the parameter for a hidden anamorphic broadcast with the double key as the secret key of the broadcast encryption, and they give to each anamorphic receiver a double key, and then now the sender will produce a ciphertext for many channels, and in such a way that every user in the same channel will decrypt to the same anamorphic message. And we should, to be sure that the anamorphic ciphertext and the ciphertext, normal ciphertext, are indistinguishable from the view of the dictator, who can corrupt the public key and secret key of the normal receiver. And in our work, we show that these two ciphertexts are indistinguishable for randomly chosen message. It would be more challenging to consider the case where the message is chosen by the dictator. But at the first glance, it looks quite counterintuitive, because now one ciphertext can encode many messages for many different users from different target sets. And indeed, if the public key is one-to-one plaintext and ciphertext, then we cannot do anamorphic. However, we suppose that the public key is standard one, need to be sure, secure, and then it need to be probabilistic. And in many cases, it contains redundancy. And so exactly by exploiting the randomness and the redundancy, that we can embed the anamorphic message and to do anamorphic encryption. And here's our construction. So our generic approach is intuitively transformed from anonymity to anamorphism. And we are based on anonymous multi-channel broadcast encryption. And so we suppose we have a public key encryption, and we can associate to this public key encryption an anonymous multi-channel broadcast in such a way that the ciphertexts are indistinguishable. Then the sender now can set up the anamorphic, the anonymous multi-channel broadcast, and because and instead of sending the public key ciphertext, they send the broadcast ciphertext. And because of the anonymity, that the ciphertext don't leak any information about the identity of the receiver, and because the ciphertext of the encryption and the broadcast are indistinguishable, then everything looks normal to the dictator. And in fact, our concrete construction are based on some previous work. First, the notion of multi-channel broadcast was introduced in 2012, but it is not anonymous, and the ciphertext does not look like any underlying public key. And then there's a multi-receiver encryption with traitor tracing in 2014, based on LWE. And this works for one channel, encrypt for everyone. But there is a nice property is that the ciphertext is obtained from and indistinguishable from the ciphertext of the underlying public key, the dual recap LWE. And then this scheme is generally extended to anonymous broadcast in 2012 with one channel, and the ciphertext is only the same form as the public key. And we generalize this last scheme to multi-channel and anonymous. And so our scheme is based on LWE. So let's briefly recall the SIS problem and LWE problem. So the SIS assumption essentially assumes that given a random matrix with appropriate parameter, then it's hard to find a shock vector such as I summer equal to 0. And the LWE is a decisional version of SIS, and essentially says that if you take a uniform distribution from the image of A, then plus 9, then it looks indistinguishable from uniform distribution. And the idea under the public key encryption is to take a random sample from image of A, then plus 9 as a mask. And then with a secret key, X, then we can unmask by multiply X with this sample, we get X times noise, which is SOC. And if we don't have the secret key, then the mask looks random and completely hide the message. And the multi-receiver and broadcast are based on an extension of this of LWE, that's called KLWE. And now the matrix A is generated with an associated trapdoor. Then by using GPV, then we can do pre-image sampling to have many shorter solutions of SIS, and each solution is given to a receiver to decrypt. And now, suppose that the other three have one short solution, and then the uniform distribution from image of A plus 9 is not anymore indistinguishable from uniform distribution, but it is still indistinguishable from uniform distribution on the space orthogonal to X plus 9. And this could be generalized to K solution. And given X1, X2, Xk, then the image of A plus 9 is indistinguishable from the subspace orthogonal to all the X1, Xk plus 9. And this is essentially the KLWE assumption, and it could be reduced to the standard LWE with polynomial reduction. And if there is no noise, then the uniform distribution is a span of X1, Xk plus 9 is indistinguishable from the uniform distribution. And this can be tweaked from the tracing in the scheme of 2014 to an anonymous broadcast scheme. And for an anonymous broadcast scheme, for any target set of T user, for about the universe of K users, then we can use the subspace orthogonal to all X1, Xk in the target set, and plus 9 as a mask. And you can see that anyone in the target set can multiply with this one and get a small, and so can unmask. Any other one from the KLWE see the mask as random and cannot decrypt. And this is, and from this scheme, in fact, we can extend it to multi-channel, because first for one channel. And now we can put a small beta in the mask in such a way that everyone in the target set now multiply with this mask Y, then they will decrypt to get the same result in the decryption, and the decryption is modified depending on beta Y1. And now this it means that everyone in the target set still decrypt to the same thing, and anyone else decrypt to random things. And so for the multi-channel, we can partition the target set S into many subsets of S1, S2, Sj, and for each subset Si, we can associate to a different beta I, and then at the end, everyone in the same subset Si will decrypt to the same result. And this is the underlying idea in our multi-channel broadcast encryption. And from the anonymous multi-channel broadcast encryption, now the ciphertext, you can see the mask is still distinguishable from the uniform distribution, and is in the same form as the mask in the dual recap LWE encryption. And so the scheme and the ciphertext, we can show that are indistinguishable, and is hide all the identity on the target set. And so we can get anonymous multi-channel broadcast encryption, and from our generic approach, we can get a PKE with anamorphic broadcast channel. So let me conclude with some discussion. So anamorphic crypto, so there's some recent direction, and one of the another important direction is about sender anamorphism that I didn't talk in this talk, where the dictator can also ask the sender to encrypt a false and specific message and provides a proof of doing so by giving him the randomness. And this works on extension of the model like robustness, anamorphic extension, and anamorphic resistant encryption, and anamorphism in other primitives like in signature, FSG, and there's some generic construction with negative and positive result that I guess Francesco will give in the next talk. And so there's some open question. The first one to extend this one-to-many channel to both direction, and in particular for public key anamorphism, where we do not need to share any double key between the sender and the receiver. And the second open question is to consider anamorphic broadcast mode for more scheme. And I think this will enhance the research direction on bounded model for anonymous broadcast encryption. The full collusion model for anonymous broadcast encryption, there is an impossibility result, which states that a fully collusion anonymous broadcast encryption, we cannot get a more efficient scheme than the trivial scheme with linear size in the number of users. However, like we see here, for bounded scheme, you can get very interesting scheme, and the anamorphic cryptography could give a motivation for justification for this kind of study, because in anamorphic, we only need to establish about the number of channels. So for example, some 100 receiver or channels is pretty enough. And so it could be, I think it could be interesting to reconsider the bounded collusion anonymous broadcast encryption. So I conclude the talk, and thank you for attention.
Any questions?
A very nice talk. And I only have a question regarding the security model. And in this broadcast model, does each of the receiver, when asked by the dictator, does he or she have to surrender only his own key? Or do they have let's say, the identical decryption key? Everyone should surrender if being asked by the dictator.
Yeah, in fact, because everything looks normal for the dictator, then the receiver only says that I only have the the normal secret key. There's no any way to check if he has the double key or not, and so he can surrender the secret key, the normal secret key, and they can deny the existence of the double key. Because the key rule is, states that for any public key, for example, put in public, so the dictator can ask the corresponding secret key. But for the double key, in this case, there is no associated public key put anywhere, and so the dictator cannot come and ask the corresponding secret key.
So the receiver only, well, everyone has the same key, and when asked, to only surrender that thing.
So?
I mean, so each, it's only one receiver. Okay, he didn't say it's multiple. Okay, then I get it. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Can you maybe comment more on robustness of this construction? So suppose there are 100 channels, is it possible they would decrypt some normal message that is sent into some unintended anamorphic message? Like,
what do you mean?
so suppose there are 100 channels and I'm sending just a normal message that
Yeah.
contains no anamorphic message. Is it possible that some of them will pick it up as like decrypt it into some not unintended anamorphic message?
So here, as I said, in our model, we work for randomly chosen message. And for the sender anamorphism, then the dictator can also ask the sender to send chosen message by the dictator. But that's case we didn't deal with, and so it could be an interesting open question to extend to also the sender anamorphism, where the message is also dictated by the dictator.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can discuss offline. Thank you.
Okay. I think we should move on. If you have more questions, we can take it offline.
So thank you.
Thank you again. All right. So our last talk of the session is going to be generic anamorphic encryption revisited, new limitations and constructions. This is by Dario Catalano, Emanuele Giunta, and Francesco Migliaro, who is giving the talk.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. So, okay, hi everyone, I'm Francesco. I'm going to talk to you about generic anamorphic encryption. So let's briefly recall what is anamorphic encryption. Usually in the public key encryption context, we have two parties, a sender and a receiver, and they want to communicate privately. And all that they need is just that the receiver produces a key pair, so a public key and a secret key, and publishes her public key, such that later the sender can encrypt the message using an encryption algorithm along with the public key of the receiver, and send this ciphertext to her. And then later, the receiver can just decrypt it using the secret key. And the usual security requirement that we ask for public key encryption is just that an adversary that has essentially the same power as the sender in this context, so that you can just encrypt messages looking at the public key of the receiver, cannot tell if an encryption of a message, I call it M0, is different from an encryption of a message M1. But what if this adversary is a quite strong adversary, and we call him a regulator, that can ask for the secret key of the receiver? Of course, in this case, the privacy against the message is lost. And anamorphic encryption tries to answer the question if we can obtain privacy from the regulator. So, and if you think that this is not actually an actual threat, then the comics will explain better than even my words. Indeed, in the whole cryptography, we always have an implicit assumption that we call the receiver privacy assumption, which essentially states that we have secrets that we can keep them secret. But an adversary that can ask for your secret key, it may exist. So how can we obtain privacy against this such strong adversary using anamorphic encryption? So we have the same context as before, but now the sender and the receiver can use the anamorphic counterpart of the regular encryption algorithms. So the receiver, when she wants to produce a secret key pair, secret and public key pair, just uses the anamorphic generation algorithm, and that gives to the receiver an anamorphic secret key along with an anamorphic public key, but also another, let's say, secret key that we call a double key. And this key has to be shared with the sender, such that later the sender, when he wants to send a message to the receiver, can use the anamorphic encryption algorithm, and so it can encrypt into one ciphertext two different messages, the regular one and the anamorphic one, using the anamorphic public key and the double key. And later the receiver, using the anamorphic decryption algorithm, can obtain the anamorphic message. And the security requirement for anamorphic encryption is that this ciphertext must look like a regular encryption of the message M. So indeed, we define the security of an anamorphic triplet in respect to a public key encryption scheme. And we have the real game in which the adversary interacts with the real encryption algorithm, asking for queries for both regular messages and anamorphic messages. While in the anamorphic game, he interacts with the anamorphic encryption algorithm. And we require that the real game must be computationally indistinguishable from the anamorphic game. So among the past years, we have several constructions. Most of them are specific, like they exploit of the underlying public encryption scheme, for example, like the Naur-Young transform, or some randomness recoverability property, or hybrid encryption, or they just leverage on the specific structure of a public encryption scheme, or exploit reduction properties. While on the generic side, we have essentially just one construction, which is the rejection sampling one. And I'll show you that just to give you an idea of what is an anamorphic encryption. So the anamorphic generation algorithm just runs the regular encryption algorithm and samples also a key for a PRF. And then when we want to anamorphically encrypt a regular message along with a anamorphic message, we just encrypt the regular message with the regular encryption algorithm until the evaluation of the PRF on the ciphertext is equal to the anamorphic message. And then when we want to decrypt, we have just to evaluate the PRF. So this construction seems to be secure for every CPA public encryption scheme, but there is a problem. It only supports log lambda bits of anamorphic messages, but this turns out to be optimal for any black box construction, so we're happy with that. So now the regulator knows that any black box anamorphic encryption can transmit at most log lambda bits, but it would be happier if there exists some scheme that cannot be made anamorphic. And so we want to answer the question if there exists some anamorphic triplet for any public encryption scheme. And I give you a spoiler, the answer is no. So let's build up a counterexample to this. I'll show you how to derive what we call a weak public key encryption scheme. So given any in-CPA public key encryption scheme, we can construct a new public key encryption scheme which is still in CPA but cannot be made anamorphic. And we just need an injective one-way function and a set B that is polynomially bounded and that is disjoint from the set of ciphertexts. And we just run the regular encryption algorithm, and we sample a random message M star that we call a weak message, and we evaluate the one-way function on this message. And then we augment the public key with the evaluation of the one-way function, and we put the weak message in the secret key. So later, when we want to encrypt, if the message that we want to encrypt is the weak message, then we just sample a random ciphertext in the set B. Otherwise, we just regularly encrypt the ciphertext. And we want to decrypt, we do the inverse operation. We check if the ciphertext is in the set B, and then we return the weak message. Otherwise, we just regularly decrypt. And why this cannot be made anamorphic? Because the regulator can ask for an encryption of the message M star along with anamorphic message 0, and we'll obtain the ciphertext C0. And then he can do the same for the anamorphic message 1, obtaining ciphertext C1. And at this point, he just checks for collision. And it turns out that in the real game, we have this probability of collision, while in the anamorphic game, because of correctness, the collision probability is different, and so this allows the adversary to distinguish the two games. But we want to rule out any black box construction of anamorphic encryption, and so we define what is a black box anamorphic encryption, which is just an anamorphic triplet that can access the underlying public key encryption scheme through oracle calls. And we make an assumption that if the oracles are a correct and secure public encryption scheme, then the anamorphic triplet along with the public encryption scheme is a serial anamorphic encryption. And in particular, we take this public key to be as an ideal public encryption. So we just take the generation algorithm and the encryption algorithm as random functions. So let's specify better what is a weak message. So a weak message, I'm sorry, is weak if it has only polynomially many ciphertexts associated to it, if it looks like a random message, and if it is hard to find only given the public key. This because we want to still be in CPA. And so we have defined this weak public key encryption scheme, which is always ideal. We have another procedure that we call the find procedure that allows someone that knows the secret key to obtain some weak message. So again, the generation algorithm and the encryption algorithm are truly random functions, but the encryption algorithm this time has also is equipped with a function tau that we call tau as a randomness biasing function that acts as identity on good messages and compresses on weak messages. And so why this is in CPA? Because if the secret key is random, then the secret keys are to find, and we cannot distinguish the games. If we don't know the secret key, then the weak messages are random, and so the adversary cannot pick a weak message during the challenge, the CPA challenge. And if we cannot ask for C star, then and the message that he queries is not weak, then he cannot obtain essentially a ciphertext that matches the challenge ciphertext. And given this, the adversary just asks for a weak message, and the attack is essentially the same, but he asked for several queries this time. So he asked for several queries about MSAR and anamorphic message 0. He does the same for the anamorphic message 1. And then he returns 0 if there are no collision, and 1 if there are collision. And we obtain some bounds. So in the real game, this is the collision probability, while this is the collision probability in the anamorphic game. Again, it is because of the correctness of the anamorphic triplet. And so the adversary can always distinguish. So related to this ideal public key encryption scheme, there is no anamorphic encryption. But what can we obtain at this point? We have defined the semi-adaptive anamorphic encryption, which is essentially like the regular anamorphic encryption, but this time the secret key is given to the adversary just after the query phase. And again, we require that the two games are computationally indistinguishable. And so regarding semi-adaptive anamorphic encryption, we can import some previous results, some previous limits and impossibilities regarding the normal notion of anamorphic encryption. So that any black box semi-adaptive anamorphic triplet can transmit at most log lambda anamorphic bits. And that black box asymmetric semi-adaptive anamorphic encryption is impossible. Asymmetric anamorphic encryption is just some stronger notion of anamorphic encryption. And so what can we say about rejection sampling now? Well, rejection sampling can work for almost any secure and correct public key encryption. We just need to make this milder assumption about that we call the high-mean entropy ciphertext. So we need that to every message there are enough ciphertext. But at the same time, also without this additional assumption, we can always obtain a semi-adaptive anamorphic encryption. And this is optimal, again. So just to give you an overview of the results, and also to speak a little bit about results that I have not presented here. So we have the whole set of public key encryption schemes. There is a subset of the one with high-mean entropies. And we already know that we can transmit at most long lambda bits for any black box anamorphic encryption triplet. And in this work, we also extend this to the semi-adaptive setting. And we also prove in the paper that powerful non-black box tools, such as verifiable virtual black box obfuscation, does not help to circumvent this lower bound. And we know from previous works that the asymmetric anamorphic encryption is impossible in a black box way. And we extend this also to semi-adaptive asymmetric anamorphic, to semi-adaptive anamorphic encryption. Then we prove that stateless anamorphic encryption is impossible, both in the black box context and black box augmented by these powerful non-black box tools, while stateful anamorphic encryption is possible. We show how to obtain asymmetric semi-adaptive anamorphic encryption using I/O. Essentially, this is the Psi-Water construction that boosts any secret key encryption to a public key one. And we can do the same if we require also high-mean entropy ciphertext for the plain notion of asymmetric anamorphic encryption. And that was all. Thanks for your attention.